Hey everyone, and welcome back. My name is Brady Johnson.
And mine is Joe Blocker.
And this is the Alabama Student Eagles podcast. Today we are joined by a really special guest. I'm very excited for this conversation. We have Derek Chen joining us today, and he is running for state auditor in Alabama. So thank you for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate y'all having me. It's an honor to be with y'all.
Yes.
It's our pleasure.
I'm really excited to have this conversation and hear about your story and why you're running for state auditor and what are some issues that you care about. So let's start from the beginning. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and where you come from? You mentioned earlier that you actually are originally from California.
Yes.
So I'm curious to know what it was like growing up in California and how you ended up in the great state of Alabama.
Yeah, so I have a little bit of a different background than most statewide candidates here in the state. My name is Derek Chen. I'm running for Alabama State Auditor, but I was actually born and raised in Southern California. So if
Very
y'all
different part of the country.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'll tell y'all a little bit about my family background. So back around 100 years ago, there was a really bloody civil war raging on in China between the communists, led by Chairman Mao, and the nationalist army led by General Chiang Kai-shek. So I'm not sure if y'all are kind of familiar with that history, but even to this day, there is a very vicious conflict between Taiwan and communist China. Yeah. Well, it all goes back to this civil war that happened approximately 100 years ago, and my great-grandparents fought in General Chiang Kai-shek's army against the communists. So as the communists started taking over large areas of land in China, General Chiang Kai-shek and his military retreated to the island of Taiwan.
Right.
And that's why there is a divide between Taiwan and communist China. Well, my great-grandparents retreated to the island of Taiwan with General Chiang Kai-shek, and my grandparents, who were little kids at the time, were raised on the island of Taiwan. And my parents were born on the island of Taiwan. Now, fast forward to the late 1970s, the Jimmy Carter administration decided that he wanted to switch diplomatic ties from Taiwan's government to the communist Chinese government. And when that happened, everyone on the island of Taiwan thought that the communists were about to invade them.
Right.
So everyone tried to get out as fast as possible. And this was in 1979 when everyone thought that the communists were about to invade imminently, if you can imagine at the time. So my grandparents applied for visas to come to the U.S., and they didn't immigrate to the U.S. until the early mid-'80s. And, I always wondered, why did it take so long, several years, for them to immigrate to the U.S. if everyone thought that the communists were coming? Mm-hmm. And one day, I remember as a kid asking my grandpa this at a family gathering. I said, "Granddad, why did it take so long for you guys to move to the U.S. if everyone thought that you guys were about to get invaded?" And I never forgot what he told me. He told me, yes, we were scared. Yes, we were afraid. But what kind of example would I be setting for my kids if we broke the laws of our new country in order to get here? We had to wait for our visas, and we had to do it the right way. And that's something that always stuck with me, is you have to do it the right way.
Wow.
That's powerful. So because of that experience that you had and that conversation that you had with your grandpa, what would you say to some of the arguments and debates that are happening right now, specifically on the issue of immigration and whether or not we should just allow anybody into the country and not vet any of these people and just let them come straight across our border, or instead have a more strict immigration policy? What do you want to weigh in on that and maybe share some of your views on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel very strongly about the immigration issue. I'm very anti-illegal immigration because there are millions of people across the world that want to immigrate to the U.S., and they're doing it the right way. They're going through the vetting process. And as a sovereign nation, the United States of America, as a sovereign nation, we have the absolute right to determine who gets to immigrate to this country and who doesn't. Nobody has a right to immigrate to our country. You know, we're a sovereign nation. We have the right to determine that. And I think that it is really important that we get very strict vetting procedures for potential immigrants that want to come to the U.S., and they need to pass through all of the rigorous vetting so we don't have a national security threat, as we saw in the situation in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, and that's so important because all of the people who don't come here legally, all of the people under, the Biden administration who are just waltzing across our southern border with no, again, like I said, no vetting whatsoever. They were just allowed to come straight into our country.
Yes.
They were actually cutting in line.
Right.
And they were going around the system, whereas there's a lot of other people who actually go through the process and come here the right way. And so, I would say, and you can tell me if you think this is fair, that all of those people who come here illegally and cut in line, that's an insult to people like you or people like your family who came here the right way and went through the legal process.
Sure. And, I take a particular issue with an argument that is often framed by the left, and it's that, we shouldn't deport those illegals that have not committed a crime. Well, every single one that has come here illegally has committed a crime.
Yeah.
They violated federal immigration law, which is a criminal offense.
Yes.
And a lot of times people who say, illegal immigration is bad get demonized because it's like, oh, but they're running away from the drug cartels or they're trying to find a better life for themselves. And I'm not out here saying I'm against immigration. I'm against illegal immigration. As a Christian, I want people who don't believe in God from other countries to maybe come to my country so that I can spread the gospel to them. But coming illegally, that's a whole different story because that means that we can have people who are dangerous. The drug cartels that they are running from come to our country, which is the opposite of what I want. So I completely agree with you on that. So I just wanted to say, I firmly believe in immigration, but only legal immigration.
Right.
Yeah.
And, that kind of goes back to, President Trump's stance. I've been a supporter of President Trump since he first came down the golden escalator. I was in college at the time. I was actually chairman of the college Republicans. And I remember when President Trump was talking about how we want a big wall on the southern border to prevent illegal immigration, but he wanted a big, beautiful door for legal immigrants to come in after they go through a legal vetting process. And, that's something that really stuck out to me about President Trump. He was the first candidate that I had ever heard that was able to effectively articulate the problems that we had with illegal immigration on the southern border. And, he really impressed me as a person who just became of legal age to vote, because of his stance on putting his focus strong on supporting legal immigration while combating illegal immigration. It's something that is really important to me, and I believe it really strongly. We need to have proper vetting procedures. We want the best and brightest folks coming to our country through a legal process. And we have to deport illegal immigrants who break our laws, break our rules, and have no regard for the American way of life.
Yeah, it's great to have compassion for people in other countries and people who are in certain situations that might be dangerous or that might be hard, who want to come to America. It's good to have compassion for those people, and we should. But at the same time, you have to remember that if the current immigration system that we have is leading to the deterioration of our country, then America will cease to be a great nation. If we just simply let anybody who wants to come here, then that will eventually lead to the downfall of America, and then nobody will end up benefiting from American greatness and American exceptionalism. So if you take the argument that, well, everybody wants to come to America because America is such a great nation, then the first thing, the thing that is most important is that we make sure that America continues to be a great nation, so that people are able to come here legally in the future and enjoy, the American dream and the ability to pursue all the opportunities that America offers. But if we simply allow anybody to come here simply because, they say that they're fleeing dangerous situations in their own countries, then that means we're not looking out for what's in the best interest of the American people and what's going to lead to the continuation of American greatness in the future. And another thing that I think is important is I would say a dynamic when it comes to this immigration debate is that the left appeals to people's emotions a lot. And they try to appeal to people's sense of compassion. And I think I understand why a lot of people hear those arguments and sometimes are persuaded by those arguments. But it's also important to remember that while compassion is a good thing, you also have to have standards in your society. And that's kind of like what we're talking about right now. There has to be standards and there has to be laws. And if you make sure that everybody follows those laws and everybody has to live up to those same standards, that's what ends up being the most compassionate thing in the end.
Well, I will say this about the compassion point.
Yeah.
President Biden's open border policy is the least compassionate thing that we could have done, because with the open borders policy, what we saw was an enabling of criminal activity of coyotes that make a business out of smuggling people, vulnerable people across the border, and that open border policy enabled that. And I think that that's the least compassionate thing that we could have done.
The left advocates for women's rights, but then they allow, rapists and coyotes, like you were saying, over our borders. And I'm like, they don't allow, they support them coming over the border out of compassion.
But it's also the opposite of compassion. Like I was saying, for people like your family who came here legally and came here the right way. Yeah, I want to return. I think that's a really great discussion and important to talk about. But I want to return to your story because I was curious if there was anything else about your background or any other maybe conversations that you had with parents or grandparents that kind of shaped your worldview and your perspective on life.
Yeah, so that is a really great question. I always tell folks, I knew I was not able to stay in California from a very young age because I knew since I was 3 years old that I was a strong conservative Republican. And I knew this because when I was 3 years old, the 2000 presidential election was going on between then Vice President Al Gore and then Texas Governor George W. Bush. And my mom had the debate going on in our living room. And every time that the TV screen would cut to Vice President Gore's face, I would point to the TV screen and scream, "I don't like him." So 3-year-old Derek knew he was a strong conservative Republican.
You had the conservative instincts from a young age.
That's right. And so I knew I knew that I needed to flee California. And, I always tell folks I was very fortunate. Because my family fled the threat of communism and came to the United States of America. Well, I fled the Socialist Republic of California and made it to the free state of Alabama. And I'm very grateful for that.
So then how do you feel about people like, Zoran Mamdani in New York who are outspokenly socialist, if not outright communist in their views of government? And saying things like we need to start redistributing wealth. How do you view that, considering where you come from and your story about how your parents had to flee communism and come to America? So, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's a very scary situation, and I think scary is the appropriate word for that. It's very frightening.
Yeah.
Because that it's been proven over history, time and time again, socialism does not work.
Yes.
We have to support the free markets. We have to support our economy, and we have to support, the private sector, because at the end of the day, the government cannot create a product or a service. That is up to the private sector. What the government can do is to get out of the way so that the private sector can thrive. And that's something that I really believe in and I think is so important.
Yes. If I had to narrow down the difference between conservatives and the left, I would say it's that the left thinks that or believes that the government is the solution to society's problems, whereas conservatives believe that individuals are responsible for their own society and responsible for their own lives and responsible for making decisions that will end up benefiting their society in the long run instead of simply relying on the government to solve all of your problems.
Yeah, you know, that's a great point. You know, that's really our American mentality,
Yes.
right? You know, ultimately our lives are up to us. And that's why it's important that as individuals, as Americans, we work hard and we pursue our dreams because at the end of the day, it's on us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Zoran Mamdani, I think in his victory speech after winning the New York mayoral race, he had a quote where he said basically like, there's no problem that's too big for government to solve, and there's no issue too small for government to solve. So in other words, government should be involved in everything. And I think that's really dangerous because the whole American, the most central idea, or one of the central ideas, I should say, of the American founding was that government should always do the bare minimum. Government should protect people's rights and provide for the national defense. And beyond that, allow individuals to exercise their own freedoms and make their own choices.
Yeah, and talking about, you know, the Biden administration that we were talking about earlier, I thought the Biden administration is a great example of the government in America becoming larger, but Trump is all about having a small government, and we see that evidence. We see that evident in a lot of things that he does.
Yes. Okay. So you were saying that you fled the Socialist Republic of California.
That's right.
And then, so how did you end up moving to Alabama? What made you decide to come here?
So I moved to Alabama to go to law school. Let me back up real briefly. I moved to Michigan first to go to undergraduate school at a small Christian liberal arts college called Hope College.
Okay. I've heard of them before, actually.
Yeah. Hope College is a private liberal arts school that is affiliated with the Reformed Church. And I went to Hope College for my undergraduate. I studied political science and I minored in history. Well, while I was at Hope College, I was active with the student government. We called it Student Congress at Hope College. And once a year, all of the members of Student Congress would go to the president's mansion, the college president's mansion, and have dinner with the president of the college. And the president of the college at the time used to teach at Samford University in Birmingham.
Okay.
And so I was telling him that I was interested in pursuing my legal studies and going to law school. And he said, you know, Derek, I have a school that I want you to go take a look at. It's in Birmingham, Alabama, and I used to teach there. It's called Samford University. They have a great law program called the Cumberland School of Law. And it's very similar to Hope College in the sense that it's very similar size. It's a religiously affiliated school as well. The only difference is that Samford University has grad programs and we don't. And I think you'll really like it. So he put me in touch with the admissions team at Cumberland, and I came down to visit, and I really, really liked it. And I knew that this was where I wanted to go. And I moved to Birmingham to go to law school. And very shortly after, I knew that Alabama was where I wanted to spend the rest of my life. So I finished my studies there. And I practiced law in Jefferson County prior to becoming a candidate for office. And I also did a MBA program at the University of Alabama. So I have my Juris Doctor and my MBA.
Okay. That's really cool.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. So my next question is how did you end up getting involved in politics? Because you said you know, when you were like 3 years old, you were watching the presidential debate and you were already rooting for the Republican candidate. And then at Hope College, you were involved in the student government. So is politics something you've always been interested in? Or did you just recently get involved, or what led you to becoming more involved in politics?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. So I've always been interested in politics, but even more so in public policy. You know,
Yes.
there's a difference between politics and public policy. I'm really interested in pursuing conservative, reasonable, common sense public policy, which is conservative public policy. But in order to be able to get to that common sense public policy, we have to go through the political process. And so that's something that I've always been interested in, is pursuing conservative public policy. But in order to enact conservative public policy, we have to go through the political process. And so I was chairman of the College Republicans while I was an undergraduate student. I was a member of the Cumberland Republicans when I was in law school. Been active with various Republican groups and have always been interested in the process. And I decided to run for state auditor because the state auditor's position, if you don't mind, let me tell your audience a little bit about what that position entails.
That was going to be my next question.
So oftentimes when I'm on the campaign trail, folks don't know what the state auditor does. They think that you're the accountant for the state or something like that. But the state auditor doesn't do financial audits. It only does property audits. So the state auditor is in charge of keeping track of physical state property, so physical property that's owned by a state agency that has a value of $500 or greater. So think computers, think desks. So anything that's physical property owned by a state agency is kept track of by the state auditor's office. And that amounts to almost $1.5 billion worth of property. And that's billion with a B. And so, you know, when you're talking about that much state property, it's really important that we really keep a watchful eye out, and make sure that that property is being used appropriately. Because at the end of the day, that property doesn't belong to any bureaucrat in Montgomery. It doesn't belong to any politician in Montgomery. It belongs to we the people. And so we ought to treat that as such. But the state auditor also has a couple other important functions. And many folks don't realize this, but the state auditor appoints registrars all across the state.
Okay.
In 66 of the 67 counties. There's one exception, which is Jefferson County, and that's because of the way that Alabama law is written, where Jefferson County appoints their own registrar through their own process. But in all other counties, the state auditor gets an appointment to the Board of Registrars. And the Board of Registrars are very important officials in our state because they are the only folks in our state that have the legal authority to add anybody to the voter rolls or remove anybody from the voter rolls.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So folks often think
that's a big deal. Yeah.
Folks often think that the Secretary of State's office is in charge of maintaining our voter rolls, but it's actually the registrars in each of the counties that are in charge of that. So election integrity is something that is so important to me. You know, if you look at many of the liberal states, you know, their elections are a mess. And we need to make sure that our elections and our voter rolls are clean. And so that's why it is so important to me that we have folks in those registrar positions that understand the importance of election security, that understand the importance of election integrity, and that understand that only eligible U.S. citizens who are residents of the state of Alabama should ever be allowed to vote in Alabama's elections, period.
Yes, that's exactly right. That's really interesting to hear because I didn't even realize that that was under the state auditor's authority. So that's really cool. I bet a lot of people out there listening to this right now didn't even know that. So that's important because obviously elections are fundamental to a democratic republic like we have here in America. And if you don't have safe and secure elections, then you can't count on anything in your government to be fair and transparent.
Yes. And so you said you're running. What is one thing you wish to do once if you were to be elected into office?
Yeah, so I think that it is really important that we streamline the process of our property audits. And so back in the day, historically, folks, the auditor's office would have to send people to the various state agencies with like a physical clipboard and be like, oh, that desk is there, that computer is there, and physically mark it off. But now we can leverage technology to make that process more efficient and save money for the taxpayers. I also want to appoint strong conservative registrars in all of the counties where the state auditor has an appointment, who really are going to put their focus strong on securing our voter rolls, because that is so important. Having a clean voter roll and having clean elections is the cornerstone of our constitutional republic. And if we don't have clean voter rolls and we don't have clean elections, then our constitutional republic will deteriorate very fast, very rapidly. And it's so important that we put our focus on election integrity.
Yes.
Let me talk briefly about another function that the state auditor has that often folks don't realize, and that is the State Board of Adjustments. So the state auditor sits on the State Board of Adjustments, and what that is it is a quasi-judicial entity. So our state's constitution, the Alabama Constitution, prohibits you and I from walking down to circuit court or district court here in Coleman County and filing a lawsuit against the state of Alabama. So our Constitution prohibits citizens from suing the state. The state has immunity from lawsuits. So what happens if the state owes you money? What happens if a vehicle from the Department of Transportation backs into your car? Well, you can't sue the Department of Transportation, so you would have to file a claim with the State Board of Adjustments. And the State Board of Adjustments will, like a court, similar to a court, would hear evidence and determine whether or not money is owed. And that is a really important job. And, that's where I think my legal background can be a really big asset to that, because those decisions, it's so important that we're fair and that we get those decisions right. Because unlike a lawsuit where you can appeal it to a higher court, there's no recourse for appealing a decision by the State Board of Adjustments. So it's really important that we're fair and we get those decisions right.
Yeah. So just to sum it up for everybody who's listening, the state auditor oversees the voter rolls through appointing, registrars in different counties?
They don't oversee the voter rolls. They are in charge of appointing registrars,
yes,
who are in charge of overseeing the voter rolls.
Okay, so appointing registrars who oversee the voter rolls, and then handling those lawsuits that you were just talking about, and then ensuring government efficiency, which, who couldn't get behind that? We want our government to be more efficient. So
especially the DMV.
yes, make government more efficient.
and that's something that I'm very, very passionate about, is because the state auditor's office, when you come down to it, it's really a government accountability office. Right. It serves as a check on our state's government, and it is so important that our government remains accountable to the people, because when my family fled the threat of an authoritarian regime, they came to the United States of America. If we lose our freedoms here at home, where do we go? So it is really important that our government is as restrained as possible, so that we as Americans and Alabamians have as much freedom as possible.
Yes. Yeah, I love that you're focusing on accountability in government, because I think that's something that we've really lost, especially like at the state level and also especially at the national level.
Yeah.
That's a major thing because government has become so bureaucratic, and the creation of this administrative state, which we could talk about if you want to, but basically we have in government this bureaucratic system, and the people, the voters, feel like they can't hold those bureaucrats accountable. So I love what you're talking about, making government more efficient, making government more transparent, and making sure that our leaders are actually accountable to the people who they serve.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think that's really good. So
I love that. You're definitely
Yes.
Servant of the people minded, which is what we
Thank
want
you.
to see in our government more often.
yes.
you so much.
So if anybody out there is interested in supporting your campaign or learning more about it, do you have a campaign website that people can go to, or how can they support you?
Yeah, so my campaign website is derekforalabama.com, and you can find me on social media, Derek Chen for Alabama. Easy to find on social media.
Yeah. Okay. So one final question. We've got a lot of student Eagles out there who want to get more involved in politics.
Yes.
And who want to start making a difference at the local level and might have, big goals and big aspirations for the future. So what is some advice that you would give to some of our students out there, or just any students who might be watching this?
That is such a great question, because not too long ago, I'm 28 years old, and so not too long ago, I was a student as well.
Yeah.
And, I remembered wanting to get involved and wanting to make an impact, and I cannot stress this enough. It's find good candidates, good campaigns of people that you believe in, and volunteer for their campaign, do internships for their campaign, and really learn about the process, because I'll tell you, I worked on local, state, legislative campaigns while I was in college, and so much of what I experienced on the campaign trail, I really learned from those experiences, and now as a candidate myself, it's been so valuable. So it's so important to get involved in that. It's important to get involved in conservative organizations like Eagle Forum as well. I've been a longtime supporter of Eagle Forum. Miss Uni Smith and Becky Garrettson are really close, dear friends of mine, and I've known them for years and have been active with the Eagle Forum. It's important to find those organizations that you trust and really volunteer for them, support them, learn from them, and you'll have those experiences will pay off in dividends. And what you two are doing, I really admire all of the hard work that y'all do.
Thanks.
And
Thank you.
I've gotten to know both of y'all's parents a little bit.
Yeah.
And known Rebecca for years, actually. And I just know that I'm sure they're so proud of both of y'all. So
Aw.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I think there's, like you were saying, there's so many opportunities for young people to get involved and start making a difference right now. If you're willing to put yourself out there and be confident and work hard, there's a lot of opportunities out there.
Absolutely, and that's the American way. Is you have to work hard, because ultimately, the trajectory of your life is in your hands, and that is something that you can't say about in any other country in this world. What other country could a first generation American born from immigrants from Taiwan could run for a state office? There's no other country in this world
Only in
where my
America.
story could be possible.
Yeah.
And I really look forward to getting to meet as many folks across our state as possible and hearing about their concerns, because at the end of the day, I want to serve them, because Alabama and this country has given me everything, has given me so much, and I really owe a debt to the state of Alabama and to the United States of America. And so that's why I am so passionate about, these conservative public policy issues and being able to be in a position to serve the people of our state.
Yes, America really is the last best hope on earth. And I think your story is a great testament to that.
Thank you so
Yes,
much.
thank
I
you.
really appreciate
I very
it.
much enjoyed hearing it.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I really enjoyed this conversation. So
Thank you
I'm
so
really,
much.
yes, thank
I
you
really
for
appreciate
yes,
it.
Thank you for coming on the podcast.
I really appreciate y'all having me, and Eagle Forum is such a fantastic organization, and I'm so proud of the Student Eagles for all of your accomplishments that you have done and that you will continue to do. So thank you for having me.
All right, and thank you to everyone for tuning in today. This was a really great discussion, and we're super grateful to Derek Chen for joining us for this podcast. Thank you again for watching, and we'll see you again next time.